Baik, sekarang ini masa untuk sudah bertanya dan kritik. Tak payah banyak formality dia, protokol tak ada protokol. Tanya aja, tak payah yang amat. Kalau nak tanya, kalau nak sebut penuh yang amat bawah mak Datuk Seri, Utama, Diraja, macam-macam baru habis. Kalau tidak sebut terus soal, tak payah. Okey, baik. Terima kasih Ustaz.
Terima kasih Datuk Seri. Soalan saya kepada Presiden Maybank. Report saya daripada juga Fauzan daripada UIA dan juga Gabungan Bertindak Anti-Scam Malaysia. Kita dapati tahun ini saja, tahun 2024, kita hilang 1.7 bilion ringgit Malaysia through jenayah scam. 1.2 billion, saya repeat Presiden, 1.2 billion. It is not small money, bukan kecil. Dan mangsanya adalah orang kecil ni. Ikan bilis. Dan kena tangkap mil account. Tapi punishmentnya hanya kecil. Maybank, CIMB tak rugi apa-apa. Because yang hilangnya depositors. Tadi sepanjang presentation tadi, tidak ada berusaha macam mana nak mengihsankan. You did menginsankan tapi tak ada ihsankan. Bagaimana you want to care and compassion orang yang hilang jenayah scam ni? Not just Maybank, but the whole entire bank. So bagi saya, Maybank, all bank providers kena bertanggungjawab. Sikap bertanggungjawab. It's happened in your house. The losing depositors. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Memang betul, scam ni is a major issue in the industry. Kalau apologies kita tak cover ni because I've only got 5 minutes, but certainly banking sector, including Maybank, together with Bank Negara, we have actually worked tirelessly to put things in place. Say for example, education I think is important, right? First and foremost is about providing awareness and education on how, to educate people out there to see some signs of possible scam. Banking sector alone last year, Emiramat invested about 10 million ringgit just for awareness, let alone to upgrade the system. Satu lagi ialah feature-feature yang telah diintroducekan pada application lah. So contohnya sekarang ni kalau nak tukar telefon kan untuk application transaction online, kita ada bagi 12 jam sebelum kita aktifkan semula supaya kalau ada apa-apa yang terjadi, ada keraguan waktu itu dan pelanggan tu boleh telefon, masih ada waktu. Bank negara pun sekarang ni dah ketatkan lagi dia punya guidelines against the banks, to make sure that the responsibility is clear. Now, the other part of it is that maybe Yang Rahmat, this is where I can also request, because when you look at online scam, as far as the value chain is concerned, right, it's not just the banks. Before they even want to get a bank app, they buy a phone. And they buy a phone, they buy a line, telephone line, right? All these transactions go through telephone lines. We need the telcos to also take accountability. So in Singapore, for example, the regulator and even the authorities have included the telcos to also be a party to be responsible. Because if you look at the phones, kalau kita, we already know who is the registered owner, right? Kalau ada apa-apa yang kita keraguan, can we get the information straight from the telco to say who is the owner of this? But I must say, unfortunately, it's, we're not getting the assistance. I am president of the Association of Banks as well. I'm requesting that again. I've also requested for Bangara if we can get telcos to be part of this as well. I think it's a major issue, but I think it has dropped now. Again, together with Banagara, we have even got a portal of scam, etc. The number year on year has reduced with all these things, but a lot more can be done. I agree.
Cuma nak sebut memang negara sedang koordinate, ya. Telcos has been informed. Ada cadangan untuk pindah kuasa digital untuk kawal social media kerana kadang-kadang terlalu melalui social media tentang financial scam dan lain-lain. Jadi ini sedang diperhatikan. Tapi kebimbangan kita ada reaksi bahawa nampak macam undang-undang itu terlalu ketat. But we have to look at it. Yes, please.
Terima kasih, Dato Seri. My first question is to May Wong on this funding society. But to fintech, it's very critical. You have worked across many regions and also in Singapore, and you have to operate in different regime and regulatory regime. So many of our funding society, our startup are not doing as much as what you're doing progressively. And in Singapore, because Dato Seri was saying that we have too many agencies. In Singapore, fintech is under the Singapore Monetary Authority, one stop for all fintechs. Here we have so many agencies handling fintech. So it is a big challenge because we want to be a startup ecosystem, the top 20 by 2030. So can you share about your experience in dealing with different regimes so that Malaysia can actually look whether we should rationalize? There's so many funding agencies for fintechs, whereas in some countries it's highly centralized and easy for the fintech to grow. So the second question is to Tengku Zafrul. You know that I organized as a chairman of the banks, I have organized a meeting of all the chairmen of banks, how we fund the industrial master plan. Because 70% of the banking portfolio is still on auto and also mortgages. So we need to shift our funding if we want to achieve the median income of 4,500 by 2030. Do you see the banks are doing enough to fund automation, mechatronics, and all the spillover effects? Because I find the bank is not doing enough. After the chairman forum, I think MITI has to have closer collaboration with the banking society, with the banking community to fund the industrial master plan in the next 5 years. Otherwise, we are back to square one. So, so your comment on the role of the banks. And my question to Dato Khairul, the bank, I was coordinating the Islamic fintech and launched it master plan. And I invite all the banks for the discussion. And the complaint from the Islamic fintech is that the bank is not as inclusive. They see them as a threat, rather as a part of the ecosystem. May not be Maybank, but many of them has problems getting their growth momentum of the Islamic fintech or the fintech because the bank are not seeing that as part of the ecosystem. I just want to see whether there is a mindset change among the bank to see more inclusive to get the fintechs as part of this. Thank you. Seri.
Thank you for the question. So I think maybe if I can clarify my understanding, the question is around whether it was the experiences navigating the government institutions and agencies to get the necessary support to grow the business in Malaysia versus in other markets perhaps. So that was my understanding of the question. I think, so I think a bit more background. So I was the co-founder for the Malaysian business as well. So I came back here didn't have anything, had to figure out how to open a bank account, and then what a corporate secretary was, because I was in a corporate job previously. But I think those early days was definitely a bit more challenging because no one knew who we were and what we did. Fintech was a bit of a foreign word. But I think over the past couple of years, the journey has been I think it was very clear to us who we need to go to. So for instance, in Malaysia, we are one of the main counterparts they work with, let's say it's MDEC. So they have been actually quite useful in terms of connecting us with other ecosystem players within the tech startups ecosystem, because partnerships is one of our go-to-market strategies. So we work with them, let's say some agro-food type platforms, to help to provide financing to, say, farmers or smallholders. So NTech has been actually one of those parties that we work with quite closely in order to get access to these startups. I think just to put it into numbers, Malaysia is the largest, if not the most successful country within the 5 countries that we operate in, whether in terms of book size, in terms of the numbers of SMEs that we have impacted and supported. So I think there are a couple of agencies that we see out there, but it has never been an issue whereby we get bounced around and we don't know what to do next. They're all very willing and willing to work with us. And the experience in Singapore is very similar. So you go to one or two agencies, and then they just tell you, okay, these are the things, these are the different financing support that you can have, these are the ecosystem in the tech space, these are who we can connect you with. I think one extra benefit, what sort of like puts Malaysia a bit further ahead, I think, is from a regulatory perspective. So I think the interesting point is that, so we're regulated under SE. And then under the SE, there's the Digital and Innovation arm, which they have been actually quite helpful in terms of connecting us with the different government agencies and ministries. So for example, for agriculture, they connected us with AgroBank. So then now we have conversations with AgroBank, for instance, in terms of how do we want to serve and reach out to smallholders and farmers and providing financing. So I think that is perhaps one of the bigger differences compared to working with regulators in other markets. So I think as a whole, at least from our own experience, the journey has been what you would expect, right? Working with governments and regulators.
Thank you. So the question, for those of you who may not be aware about the Industrial Master Plan, for the Industrial Master Plan, one of the targets, as mentioned, is to increase household income. And we want to increase household income with a mean of 4,500 ringgit by the year 2030 for the manufacturing sector in particular. So the 4 mission, one of them is to increase economic complexity, will mean that more companies that come into Malaysia or more companies that are already in Malaysia, when they move up the value chain, with the companies becoming more sophisticated, salary will then go in line with the increasing economic complexity. Back to the question, then what can we achieve this if the financial services are not playing their part? Actually, we know how important financial services is to the whole ecosystem, the whole equation of achieving those targets under Industrial Master Plan. We quantified it as 90 billion ringgit. Not all under the financial services, basically looking at financial support from equity markets, from debt markets, I mean equity and debt in the capital markets, in the private equity markets, the venture capital markets. So it covers the whole vertical of financing. So banks, I think, will play a major role. I think your question, I think, more towards the banks. We have been trying, and sorry, we have been engaging. We tried and now successfully engaged. There are, of course, to be fair to the banks, their risk appetite may not be as high as some of the others in that vertical. So for the like of Maybank, for example, they will come in at the different stage of development of the company. Maybe pre-IPO or even after IPO. But again, we also need to educate the banks, because when you look at capacity building within banks, they are always used to the traditional sectors, the plantation sector, the construction sector, so the digital economy, especially when it comes to semiconductor, is still very new to them. But it's not new to Malaysia. 50% of our manufacturing export is semiconductor. 40% of total exports is E&E. But if you look at the funding, they are coming mainly from foreign banks. So this is where I think with the National Semiconductor Strategy launched by our Prime Minister, we'll try and educate, engage the financial services sector, especially the local banks, to see how they can play a role in building the local champions in this. And I think Maybank has been quite instrumental in this. Thank you.
If I may add to that point, so for example, in Maybank, we have now even set up a new risk acceptance criteria or risk appetite to be able to finance these SMEs in the semiconductor business, right? And of course, one of the ways is to be able to use supply chain financing, because we know that the principles are big and the principles are good credit worthiness. And we will then, rely on these big principles to finance them based on a cash flow basis. Yeah? So that's what we're doing. I think the other question from Dato is about banks' willingness to work with fintechs, right? And of course, on the Islamic side in particular. If you ask me maybe 5 years ago, banks were a bit apprehensive on fintech, right? They look at them as competitors, but it's different now. Now it's more about collaborating with fintech, because a lot of the capabilities that banks have now, are still outdated, and if they continue the way they're doing now, fintech will overtake them. And banks that are willing to work with fintech will be the one that will progress faster. So it's a competitive environment that is taking place now. Yeah. Similarly with us, we used to maybe look at Funding Society a few years ago as our competitor, but now we are even investing in Funding Society. We want to work with them, to collaborate with them, right, and identify opportunities for relationship. On the Islamic side, for example, for Maybank, I mentioned in my presentation, there are 2 things at least we are doing already in Malaysia. One is what we call the Salam market. We are doing already with Borong platform, which is a fintech, basically for them to bring the buyers and the sellers B2B. Yeah, it's a marketplace, and then again we can help them with the banking solutions, the payments, the credit facility as well. The other one is the halal certification. We are actually facilitating halal facilitation online, and we have got this app called SingSoft, to be able to work, to facilitate, and of course, make the application to JAKIM for purposes of halal certification. In Indonesia, for example, we are also progressing from a halal point of view. We are even working with Muhammadiyah ecosystem, right? For example, to penetrate the Islamic community. As you know, Muhammadiyah is huge. So again, my point is about, I think fintech, end of the day, is about collaboration, no more competition. Whoever doesn't work with fintech, banks especially, they will fall behind. Yeah, for sure, because banks have got a lot of legacy, and if they are still continuing with their legacy, they will fall behind.
Assalamualaikum, Azman from Era Management. Quick question, especially to Datuk Khairul. I think for SMEs, they seem to have a challenge in getting funding, mainly because of ESG requirements. I see that a lot. And the reason is because I think most of the banks put the evaluations on the ESG very high. So SMEs, of course, some of them do not have the means to invest in an ESG initiative. Now, my thinking is that we should actually have tiered punya evaluation for the SMEs, because if you look at the UN SDG punya initiatives, there are 17 areas where they can comply. But it seems to me that the banks, when they want to actually fund some of the SMEs, they put these people even at the highest, sama macam katalah listed companies. So that's why a lot of SMEs do not get funding. And even if they get funding, the cost of funds, that they push to the SMEs lagi tinggi. So that, defeats the purpose of them going to the banks as well. So can, let's say, Maybank, and through your chairmanship of the bankers and also with Bank Negara, perhaps look at a tiered system in terms of evaluating the SMEs when they're actually coming for loans to the banks, because I think that will help a lot. Thank you.
Before Khairul respond, I may support that notion, because that has been a major issue which we did discuss even in the cabinet. When we embarked on this new agenda to push the SMEs, the major complaint is, of course, source of funds. Very difficult. Number 2, even when they gain, issue of collateral, etc., the cost of funds is substantially higher. And I think Khairul better respond carefully.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of criticism, thrown at banks for not supporting SME. There are mechanisms. I think Zafrul mentioned about the different level of maturity of SME, and at the various levels of maturity, there's a different source of funding, right? So you need angel investor, equity, etc., banks, etc. Now, when we look at credit for SME, then again, there are different types, right? Then depending on whether it's straightforward or not, there is also credit enhancement that an SME can get. So we've got CGC, we've got SJPP that can come in to guarantee. And, I think Maybank alone, we have done a few billion, right? I think more than 20 billion ringgit just on SJPP and CGC back financing to SME. What else? Now, okay, so I think one of the things that Maybank has done, for example, is what we call digital retail SME financing, right? And this is not reliant on any collateral, right? So we look at their account, we look at their transactions, we look at their receipts, payments, we look at just their, maybe we are even financing even companies that have been established less than 3 years. And the financing can go as low as 3,000 ringgit, and we already have got more than 2 billion ringgit in this portfolio. Yeah. Now, so what I'm trying to say is that banks are now gravitating towards not relying on collateral already, but looking at the behavior, looking at transaction activities, looking at how timely the owner of the SME pays the bills, right? Because that is the attitude. Right? Sometimes it's more the trust that we see amongst our applicants and then the profile and how they behave, as opposed to just relying on collateral. And more banks are working on that. We can do a lot more, of course, but we will take that in our spirit in terms of trying to support the SME. One of the reasons, again, why we are also investing in funding society, for example, we know that they have got different capability that we don't have in assessing SMEs, right? And the way that they provide financing, is only for maybe a few days of financing. Then they have to pay back. So it's very short-term working capital basic. So then the whole stream of our capability is there, right? So there are meetings that we may not be able to do based on our current policies, but we're also opening up to platform like Funding Society to collaborate with Maybank to be providing these types of financing to those that may not be able to get from banks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Saya Azmi dari INSEF. Just to follow up on what Dato' Khairul mentioned earlier on about SME, although initially my question was on another topic, just to follow up. We have what we call the iTekat program, yang bank negara dengan bank, and we use zakat and wakaf. But unfortunately, if we look at the amount and the number of SMEs, it's very small. If you want to create impact using Islamic social finance, zakat and wakaf, it must be a whole concerted effort. Cuma challenge kita di Malaysia ialah zakat is very much distributed. Sama juga in terms of wakaf because it's at the state level. So I think it's high time for us to really galvanize zakat to be a national program. In a sense that to become a powerful instrument to address and to enhance iTekat. Kalau tidak, we will continue to have fragmented program, small amount, and the only way is to get MOF to fund that, which is not tenable. So I believe that we need to get maybe at the higher level, Majlis Raja-Raja to agree that it should be a national program. I know this is sensitive, tetapi kalau kita nak tunjuk bahawa Islamic social finance is a very powerful instrument, this is one of the ways. Kalau tidak, we can continue talking about it and be happy discussing in a conference without any actual results. That's my suggestion.
Terima kasih. Dari segi conceptual framework dia, we are agreeable. But the issue of zakat is, of course, the state is under the various sultans. So implementation can be an issue. We have taken this up, and I think there's of course reluctance because this is in the purview of the religious authorities in the state. And zakat is of course a major source of revenue, although it's well disbursed, I mean to be fair, but not in the economic sense in terms of social financing. It's more to cater for the asnaf. So the portion which should be made for, at least for social financing, is somewhat missing. We're trying to do it for wilayah, and I think Selangor is trying to do it, Perak. But of course, it will be most effective, it can be coordinated at the national level, then the volume is much larger. But I think I'm not denying its importance or critical importance, but I think it is quite a challenging task to try and convince the rulers to try and coordinate all zakat efforts. They are willing to listen, they can get the parameters right. In fact, I must give credit to them because the level of management and transparency is much better than what has happened in the past. But in terms of taking it as a national proposition, it will be much difficult, right? Ada short one, kita nak tutup. Okay. Azman ni pasal susah nak kata no. Are you right? You are reading the whole book or?
Not cepat. Sorry. Yeah, I have to speak up to support Dato Azmi, who's my CEO di INSIAF yang I chair on behalf of Bank Negara lah. Jadi topik right on top tu menginsankan perkhidmatan kewangan lah. So I used to tease Khairussaleh before that, dan Seri Wahid, and before that Tengku Zaf juga. Kalau kita nak humanize financial services, does it mean it's inhuman to begin with? Jokes aside, Maybank is already 60-something%, right? Islamic. Because through the visionary leadership lah, I'm not just saying this. Having said that, since the question of zakat timbul, ya Mak Muhammad, the annual collection, you're right, by the states, 5 billion, lebih kurang lah. Wilayah Selangor being the highest, and somehow Perlis nombor 3. Hebat, eh? Banking system, the latest number I have is 2.5 trillion, roughly, betul ya, lebih kurang, maybe 2.6 now. Capital market, wang adik is here, 4 trillion. So let's step back, since we talk about all of nation, to get a sense of perspective and scale. I tekad, saya memang sangat teruja. I think it's a great effort. Started during COVID, by the way. And Mak Muhammad, you raised the amount from 50 million to 100 million di Bank Negara. And I think subsequent budgets ada some allocation. But let's also be realistic. If we are really going to move the needle, is that 2.5 trillion and the 4 trillion is where I need. Even the 5 billion, betul lah. Zakat bila cukup haul, cukup nisab, you have to distribute same year. And as you said, they do quite a good job. But I think the blended finance platform really got to scale up. This is what I tell Bank Negara in my capacity chairing MIC, Mak Muhammad. Tahun ni, or rather tahun lepas, at G5, we launched the position paper lah. Jadi, if I catch Tengku Zafrul punya point tadi, banking system is just one part of the system, to be fair to the banking system. There are 3 arrows, major arrows in the bow. Let's not forget the other 2. The equity markets, termasuk private equity, venture, etc. So kita punya ni, sistem ni belum cukup develop, belum cukup mantap lagi. We need to also do that. So things like POP, for example, they buat dana Memacu, bagus. Because you need to create those intermediaries because they are at different stages of development. The third arrow is actually the philanthropic capital, Muhammad, termasuk zakat, wakaf, endowment. I think the endowment tradition is not just in the Islamic tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Christian tradition pun ada. And that part, the statecraft is how to put it all together. So I would submit, sir, I sit on the MKI, where Tuanku Nazrin is now ni kan. So the wakaf plan, for example, kita kena bring all this together, because how do we mobilize this? I give one very simple example. I was shocked to find out in almost 70 tahun Merdeka, rupanya insurance, takaful or insurance tidak ada untuk food sector. Until 2 budgets ago, you put in for the petani di Kedah. Selalu kena banjir, this kind of area. I said, how can that be? And this is where my final point, and it's not Khairussaleh or anybody's fault, is that fragmentation of the financial system, di mana a for-profit financial system, I mean, I can empathize I used to, run Khazanah, and Tengku Zaf was running CIMB for us. You have quarterly results and you're a big listed company. You got to produce the financial numbers. There will always be a gap between what the developmental side, kalau betul-betul kita nak the inclusivity part, sustainability is another story. And this is where you have to use all three arrows in the bowl. The key portion is the mix and the blend, that's statecraft. How do you put that together? And there are already various platforms, and perhaps this is a good start. Bila the forum begini, you bring different elements. So I thought I should, and with Khairussaleh memang I'm sitting down with your guys, with Datuk Mus, with CIMB, about how to bring that, because let's be real, the big numbers are banking system 2.5 trillion, capital market 4 trillion. So mana yang lain is actually how to bring that together, because they also want to do, they also want to solve these things. Thank you, Muhammad. Panjang sikit. Thank you.
Okay, I've been instructed to respond. I mean, I think, as you know, I can just, if I can summarize, if I can reply in three points. The first one, when it comes to the level of financing that's required, be it for even banyak issue today they raised about SMEs, it's always going to be difficult for someone like Khairussaleh to do for various reasons. And I completely support your idea of getting all those arrows to come into play. The challenge would be, yang seperti disebut oleh Perdana Menteri tadi, one is when it comes to the state, they have certain views on the usage of zakat and wakaf. But this, I think, can be addressed if we look at it holistically, but the political will must also be there. But second problem is actually, if you look at the practicality of it, even if you look at the companies itself, the SMEs, etc., many of the, kalau nak katakan private equity itu nak melabur, ataupun angel financing nak melabur, they will look at the quality of the companies itself, right? So today, I think Ahmad Mohamad very aware, when you look at productivity of our companies, the productivity of our SMEs, it's now fallen behind Vietnam. It has fallen behind Thailand. I mean, of course, we know many reasons, and one of the major reasons is foreign labor, our investment in automation, etc., or lack of that has resulted in our SME become less competitive and has resulted in people coming to fund these companies pun dah less. And the final point, I think, to get that mixture right, we need to ensure that the regulators also play a role. I think that Sri Awang ex-SC chairman is here. I mean, they done crowdfunding. I think Bank Negara also, today, when they talk about risk appetite, there's got weightage on certain capital, on the risk-weighted asset, etc. I think regulators also need to balance that developmental role that's required when you translate that into policies. So if we can look at all this together, and it's not fair to ask the financial services to look at it because they will have certain agenda or certain stakeholders that they have to address. So I think we need to look at it holistically, and I think forum like this is good because it will bring into play everybody, all the stakeholders here, then can give a new perspective towards finding the solutions. Thank you.
Terima kasih Datuk Azman. I think apa yang diutarakan itu sebenarnya suatu hal yang mendesak yang harus dipikir. Saya tidak ada alasan untuk kita lengahkan. Ada kekangan dengan negeri dan sistem, tetapi masih ada ruang dalam mesyuarat susulan Kongres Ekonomi Putra baru ini. Ya. Saya ambil pendekatan yang agak keras terhadap syarikat-syarikat ataupun agensi dan GLICS, terutama yang Bumi Putra, yang tidak melakukan atau bertindak dengan agresif untuk memenuhi mandat mereka. Ya. Kalau tidak, kita masih asyik doangkan program baru Bumi Putra, program baru Bumi Putra. Yang ada, apa yang dilakukan oleh Khazanah, apa yang dilakukan oleh PNB dalam menyelesaikan sebahagian masalah ini. Yang juga menyentuh kedudukan B40, M40, entrepreneurship di kalangan masyarakat Melayu, usahawan muda, umpamanya, sebagai contoh. Dia tidak harus membebankan kerajaan, kerana agensi-agensi sudah besar. Keseluruhannya ada ratus-ratus bilion semuanya. Jadi, saya tekankan agak keras juga, supaya dalam masa tempoh 6 bulan, mereka memberi jawapan. Okey, satu. Keduanya, misalnya macam soal yang disebut social capital zakat. Ya betul kita ada kekangan. Tetapi wilayah persekutuan sahaja punya 1 bilion. Ya. Tentunya memenuhi asnaf. Ya. Tetapi harus bangkit sebagai satu contoh pengurusan yang cukup cekap. Kerana 1 bilion ringgit untuk wilayah persekutuan itu tidak kecil. Ya. Tidak akan mengulangi ataupun bertindih dengan usaha-usaha agensi lain. Tapi kalau diselaraskan, ditumpukan, saya fikir banyak yang harus dikerjakan. Dan ini perlu pengurusan di Majelis Agama itu juga mengambil manfaat daripada kemahiran dan kepakaran yang lain. Apa salahnya untuk pengurusan di Majlis Agama Islam cari kepakaran di Maybank, Sesi, bursa, cari syarikat besar dan bagi pandangan, dan dia akan lihat tentunya dari segi syariah. Tapi kadang-kadang ini tidak berlaku kerana semuanya bekerja dalam silo. Jadi dia fikir hal-hal yang kemudiannya invest dalam hal-hal yang tidak menguntungkan kerana tidak ada kepakaran dalam bidang itu. Suruh saya, umpamanya saya, ganti Khairussaleh. Tak boleh saya habis bagi kepada orang miskin semua, bank. Jadi ada orang yang mampu urus, ada yang tidak. Saya tidak fikir saya mampu mengurus bank seperti mana yang dia akan dengan begitu baik oleh urus saya. Sebagai contoh. Jadi kalau kita dapat mengaku hal itu, seperti mana kita lakukan dalam kabinet sekarang, apa arahan kita terakhir dalam mesyuarat kabinet terakhir? Saya katakan beri ruang kepada KSU, KP, kerana mereka bukan ketua kerani. KSU itu ketua satu kementerian yang dananya kadang 26 bilion peruntukannya. Dan kalau dia berfikir sebagai ketua kerani, maka tidak akan ada perubahan. Jadi dia harus memikirkan cadangan usaha yang baru dan kemudian merencana, kemudian beri nasihat kepada menteri. Dan saya beritahu kepada jemaah menteri, tolong dengar sekejap. Setuju tak setuju tak apa lagi, tapi dengar dulu dan nilai. Baru boleh kita lakukan perubahan. Kalau tidak, kita stuck. Kerana saya masih ingat semasa saya Menteri Kewangan dulu, lama dulu sebelum diberi cuti ke Sungai Buloh. Itu soal wakaf telah dibangkitkan. Dan di antara yang paling tegas kemukakan ialah Profesor Ahmad Ibrahim. Ya. Dan untuk itu kita lakukan pendaftaran dan simpang 6 di Pulau Pinang. Ya. Tapi setakat itu, dia tidak maju. Jadi ada, dan kita berikan alasan-alasan. Memang ada alasan. Tapi sekarang ni kita kata, 3 bulan mesti bagi jawapan. 6 bulan mesti bagi jawapan. Bukan bagi alasan. Jadi saya ucap terima kasih kerana teguran itu harus kita teliti dan ini tujuannya, maknanya forum ilmuwan ini di antara lain untuk bagi sedikit sebanyak asapkan kejutan selain daripada rangsangan. Jadi sekali lagi saya ucap terima kasih kepada Khairussaleh, Zafrul dan Momeng kerana memberikan cadangan dan yang juga akan membantu dalam bidang, 3 bidang yang lain. Meng Wong memberikan tekanan, saya ingat dalam satu aspek yang sangat utama lah, sebab kita ada keupayaan yang besar PMKS ni. Tetapi somehow ada sekatannya dan ada perubahan, tidak ada perubahan. Tapi saya ingat kalau kita anggap perubahan yang berlaku dan dengan pace yang ada sekarang, I don't think we can go anywhere further. Selalu kita minta, sebab tu saya ingat bila Tengku Zafrul sebut umpamanya tentang productivity dan automation yang relatif lebih lembab di Malaysia di kalangan PMKS, itu harus menuntut ada jawapan. Dan jawapan itu sebenarnya tidak semuanya harus popular. Dan saya beritahu rakan-rakan saya dan Jemaah Menteri, kalau nak lakukan yang agak tegas dan berani, lakukan tahun ini. Karena kemudian nanti dekat pilihan raya kita kena slow sikit. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.